All right, good morning. We are in Ezekiel lesson 7a. We're going to do the first 2 days of Ezekiel's homework for that lesson 7, which means what we're doing is looking at the basic observations that we did in 47 and 48. That means we won't do a whole lot of in-depth discussion about a lot of things. What we're going to try to get done today simply is to get the paragraph outlines. A couple of things that have kind of come to my mind this morning is, number one, what a treasure God has given to us to be able to kind of peek through the window or maybe even swing the window open and stick our head out into the future. Where, talk about a back to the future thing. We're going into the future in God's word, where he's showing us the beautiful temple and the land of Israel and the glory of it. And in doing that, what does that do for us in our relationship with God? Concerning his word, concerning who he is, concerning just how we feel about who he is. What does it do for us? What we have been looking at.
He's just so good. He is allowing us a glimpse into our future, and it helps me hang on now.
Yes, it does help us to hang on now, because there's promises out there that are really going to be glorious. I mean, I realize we're moving into a dispensational time, 1,000-year reign, that is not going to necessarily be perfect, because we're not yet in the new heaven and the new earth in that time. But wow, what a difference it's going to make when Jesus is ruling and reigning, when he's the judge, right? We don't have a judicial system that's completely faulty.
This study has changed my whole perspective on what the millennial kingdom is going to be.
Okay.
Because in the past, because I have not studied it, I thought it was going to be like the new heaven and new earth. Everything, all Christians, everything is going to be wonderful. God is going to be reigning with us. We're all going to be
Yes.
one little place.
Yes. Yeah. So all of a sudden you're looking. So knowing that it's not the new heaven and the new earth, but it is actually a dispensation of history upon this earth. How does that change your attitude about that time frame?
Well, it makes it global.
Okay. Yes. On this earth. Yes.
Global on this earth, and I've never known it before. So,
Okay. Do you remember when we first did Revelation, we kind of had the same thing? We talked about the 7 years of the Revelation and what was its purpose and what was it going to be like. And we all had a lot of different ideas. And one of the ones had to do with evangelism. Will people get saved? But because I grew up in a church situation where for years, and maybe the pastors just didn't know because they didn't study it back 50, 60 years ago in my youth. But the idea that there was evangelism at all going on in the 7 years blew my mind when I've studied Revelation, right? And the idea that anyone would come through it alive is another thing that kind of blew my mind. Okay, so then now that we know that there is evangelism, there will be people who come through alive, both Jew and Gentile. We talked about that now for 3 weeks running. This is week 4 on the mention of it. But we're going to move into the new heaven and the new earth with basically all believers at the beginning. But it's not going to take long before that's a done deal and gone. So we'll enjoy a honeymoon stage, so to speak, on those first.
Can you just clarify, because you said new heaven, new earth, you meant millennial kingdom.
Oh, millennial kingdom. Yeah. Sorry, in the millennial. Oh, I'm so sorry. Did I say that? Yeah. Okay. The millennial kingdom. When we go into the 1,000-year reign, that millennial kingdom, we are going to have all believers in the beginning. But that won't last forever either. So again, I'm just going to repeat and say, I thought that when the tribulation came, it was a done deal. Nobody gets saved after that, because once Jesus comes, it's all over. That's what I thought. Now it come to find out, not only is it not over for the 7 years, it's not over for the 1,000 years either. As long as we're on this physical earth and human beings are being born in their flesh, God gives each individual an opportunity to come into salvation. That's a pretty big revelation that honestly, it's clear. It's crystal clear. How come this was not taught all the years I grew up? I don't know. I don't want to be harsh on, judging anyone about that, but I do know this, that as we have progressed, even in just since COVID alone, but also because of the improvement of computers and our financial system and global travel and YouTube and videos and all, we have so much change on the earth that a lot of these things that Revelation spoke of, and that even in Ezekiel that we're seeing, didn't seem possible to happen, now are like totally plausible, right? We look at these things and go, yeah, I heard them talk about Bitcoins markets and so forth on the radio this morning, and how initially certain people who are very conservative in the way they handle their finances were really resistant to it. Now they're starting to say, well, looks like it's going to be more stable, and it looks like we need to embrace this, because if we don't, we're going to be left behind, and it's going to come anyway. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. One world, global financial, and the ability for anyone to turn it on or turn it off for you in that 1,000-year reign.
And I was listening.
Or not 1,000-year, in the tribulation.
Last night on 60 Minutes, they were talking about this computer that is actually being made, and it's kind of like a race for who's going to get it, and it's going to dominate the whole economic system.
Oh, wow. And where is this out of? What country?
They're doing it in a lot of countries, making
So
it.
it's a global
But
effort.
it's so fast and so much information, I couldn't even comprehend it.
Wow.
And how it's going to change civilization.
Right. Absolutely. Well, what is the other one that they just do with the, what is it called? Where they can do a video of you and make you look like you said something and you didn't say it. What is that called? AI. That's right, AI. So the AI is another thing that's going to make a lot of things possible to fulfill in the book of Revelation, things that we saw there.
It's already here.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It's already here. It's just at the baby stages of it, but it's already here. And already I'm suspicious of everything I see on TV. I don't know about you guys, but I look at that and go, how do we know that's him? You know? It's going to lend you to be quite suspicious, and you have to be very careful at what you believe and don't believe. So Christians, a very good word of warning to you and to me would be that everything that you see that comes through your TVs and through your radio, you've got to double check and make sure that that's actually from that agency and from that person. I have been watching some really interesting apologetic type things, and I can't remember the girl's name, Megan something, and she was being interviewed, and she's got a book out, and I've ordered the book because I want to read it and see what she has to say. But she goes through and talks about the false shepherds in our churches today, and how many of them they are, and how deceptive they are, how much in bed they are with the political agenda of the far left, with the woke agenda, that we call it woke, that are anti-Christian, anti-God, anti-family, baby hating, anything that goes against the Word of God, they're all in on board with. And many of these churches and these pastors are promoting it. And Susan, you and I have talked a few times about why don't more pastors preach on these end time things that are just literally falling upon us right now. And this girl goes in and talks about how they're not only anti anything that's in the Bible, but they're promoting, transgender and homosexuality and all these things in the church, and shoving it down the throats of pastors and shaming them and saying, and if you don't get on board with this, you're not godly, you're not a Christian, you're not loving, you're judgmental. Oh, man. As I listened to that interview, I just kept going, yeah. And she named some people. I went, yep. I nailed that person myself many years ago. And it's more and more as the years go by, I see these things that they're doing, that church is doing, in particular, these mega churches. There's a lot of them. But not even just mega churches. Why did the church fall for the COVID stuff, right? Okay, so all of this is kind of, I mean, it sounds political, but I'm telling you, it's spiritual. This stuff all lays into exactly what we're seeing as we're approaching the end time, as we get very quickly upon the times when, thankfully, I believe the church is taken out. But there'll be that tribulation. It's going to be horrific. But then comes the 1,000-year reign of Christ upon this earth, and we have to be prepared for it. We looked at a parable couple weeks back, I guess it was, where it talked about I think it was the minas one, and it was saying how, you know, God has given everyone a mina. 10 people were brought, each given a mina, and he talks about what did you do with that? And then there'll be either reward or loss of reward, meaning that parable is for believers. It's speaking about a believer. You either get a reward or you don't get a reward. Because what we are doing right now in this life is preparing us for this millennial kingdom year. We are going to be returning with Jesus as the bride of Christ, fully equipped, having been our works having gone through the Bema Seat judgment, our rewards given to us, and our assignments given to us. I don't know really what that means for any one of us, but are you working to have that well done, good and faithful servant statement by the Lord? Are you seriously engaged on a daily basis in preparation for the day when this kingdom that we're looking at right here is going to be a reality? I can't wait. All right, so I want to do a very quick review for you. It's going to take me 1 second. Segment divisions. Because we haven't talked a lot about segment divisions, but we're in a final segment division in 40 to 48. It's all about the millennial kingdom and specifically the temple. I don't know if you noticed that, but the temple is almost always, whatever's being said, it gets drawn back to the subject of the temple. So Ezekiel 40 to 42 is our description of the temple. All these measurements, how the doors are, where they sit, east and west, all those things, right? Ezekiel 43 to 44 is the worship in the temple. How the sacrifices will be made, who will bring them, what times, what seasons, what feasts and festivals. The new calendar year is given to us that we know we will begin in the spring. That will be the beginning of our year. We won't have a January New Year. We'll have a spring New Year. Okay, then now where we're at right now in the homework we're doing today, we're in our last segment division, 45 to 48. It's the land around the temple. That's the focus of everything that we've been looking at. So that's my review. Was that quick enough for you? Yes, she's going, yes.
Worship in the temple?
Yeah. 43 to 44 was worship in the temple, and then 45 to 48 is the land around the temple, which I thought was a really nice, one of the pastors kind of came up with that, I think it was Gary Hamrick. And I went, oh, I like that. That really, it takes, I mean, I had a big segment division, millennial kingdom from 40 to 48, but this breaks it down so that you can actually see the flow of thought even better. And I had not picked up on that myself, so I was really happy that he gave that little note on his slide show in his church sermon that I listened to. Everything else he said I knew, but this was good. See, you sometimes pick up one little thing, but it's helpful. For me, it's helpful because this is what we're trying to do. We've got what happened? Oh, is someone okay? Okay, good. What we want to do is we want to take all the information that we have scripturally, pull out a drawer and put it in the right drawer and close that drawer so that later when we need it, we can go to that drawer and pull it out. And what I mean by that is when we compartmentalize things like that in our brain so that we are learning doctrine rather than a storyline. Does that make sense? So if you're talking about the subjects of covenant, you can start with the promise of the seed in Genesis, go to the Abrahamic covenant that was made that followed up and added on to that. You can also even add in there the Davidic and the Levitical covenants that we've talked about now already. And then we can move forward into Galatians, and we see where the seed is Christ. And now into Ezekiel, and we can see now this is where this covenant is going to be fulfilled, is at the end of the age for the 1,000-year reign. That is the kind of training that you want to get your brain in tuned with, so that you're not looking at, oh, this is just chapter 47, and you're looking at a chapter, and you're reading the storyline, and you're walking away and going, okay, that's interesting, but what does that have to do with me? What we want to do as inductive students is train ourselves to see things through doctrine, and then we can put it in that drawer with that doctrine concerning covenant. To me, this is about covenant all the way, because this is fulfillment of covenant, right? Now, the first part of Ezekiel is covering other things like the discipline of God and how he treats people, and salvation. We had a lot of other subjects in those other places. But here from 40 to 48 is about covenant being fulfilled, and how God is going to do that and why. All right, so now let's, let me think. What else do I need to cover on this? We did do some map work, and some of this I'm going to cover with you in a little bit about, in particular, the land layout of things. You all had a map that was given to you in your homework, right? And hopefully you went in and kind of highlighted and gave yourself your scripture references where it's talking about, and still, even though this is a help, it's still not as concise as we need it to be necessarily. But one of the things we have talked about over and over is the fact that every pastor seems like has a different map in their head. No, it's going to be this big. No, it's going to be this big. No, it's cubics. No, it's reeds, for measurements amounts. So because there's variation in that, for me on this, what I think is comforting as a student is to pull back and say, well, it isn't so important that I know exactly the measurements and where on the land, as it is that it is Israel, it is God's land, he has dictated this, it will happen, and therefore he's fulfilling his word. Does that make good sense to you? Okay. So that will be helpful to you as well, because how many of you went in and did some word studies, even though we weren't asked to, on some of these cities? Okay. Did you notice that again on some of them, it's unknown for sure? They're not there yet, which makes me think, oh, that's interesting. That means that either God is going to supernaturally let them know where that land city is, or it's going to be a city in that day. Even if the city isn't there yet, it was in ancient history, and maybe it will be brought back again in the future. Is it warm in here to you? It's warm in here to me. If I faint, don't be surprised. Okay. All right. And I want to go on. Okay, let's do this now. When you are doing, this is your 101 training again, in inductive study, when you are observing any piece of literature, you need to know the literary type that you're in. So what kind of literary work are we in Ezekiel? Prophecy and history. Right. Prophecy and history. And then there's laced in there parables occasionally, right? And allegorical things. I mean, so you do have to pay attention when you're going through any book of the Bible. When there's a literary use of language, you have to identify what it is so that you know you're handling it correctly. Where we are right now, then, it being both prophecy of something that's future, but yet that future is going to be history, right? So it's a historical record of what will be. Then how do you handle history when you are looking to do your observations? What are you looking for? What are your puzzle pieces in the corners? People, places, events. We only have 3 corners on this puzzle. Yeah, people, places, and events. And you could put time reference for your 4th corner. That'll fix it. So people, places, events, and even time referencing. Okay, so when you go through to title your chapters for a book like Ezekiel, it isn't quite as much fun as it is when you're doing the epistles. I shouldn't say it that way, but for some people it's a little more complicated because they don't see the flow of it. But if you get your mind, but you got to get your mindset and realize you're not looking at a subject like in the New Testament. If you pick a book out and the subject matter pertains to salvation or to discipleship or the life of Jesus, and so you can see how that flows. But that's also history, right? If you go through the book of Acts, it's history. When you title those kinds of chapters that are history, you're looking for people, places, and events. So hopefully I can just remind you of that so that you'll feel a little more comfortable about however you're titling things. And so people, places, and events. So you tell me people, places, and events. In Ezekiel 47, I just told you by review that we are looking about, the subject matter is the temple in the millennial reign, the millennial kingdom. In 47, what aspect are we looking at here? What is the major thing that's being said here? Do you have what were your key words? Let me rephrase. The water and the land. Two major ones, water and land. And even if you only got those two, there's a few other things that get dropped in here. Then he brought me back to the door of the house. And so what's the house? That's the temple. So now you know you're back at that temple, which was much more heavily talked about in previous chapters that we've looked at, right? Where we were, this is the temple, this is the sanctuary, this is the, was detailed. Here it just makes mention to it, calling it the house. The house is the sanctuary of God, which is the temple. Okay, so you might want to mark temple in there as a key word.
I think water and temple go together because the water comes from.
Well, but they're still distinctive because the temple does not flow anywhere. It stays put.
But the water's associated with it.
Yes, it is, but they need to be marked differently.
Okay.
The temple is a
Yeah,
structure.
Yeah.
Your water is different. But there are two key words. Yeah, and they certainly are associated because the source of the water comes from the temple. And I can't wait. I didn't do it this week because I'm thinking it might be in our homework for next week. But I always think when we look at the temple and the water coming out of the throne of God, and there's many scriptures on this, and we need to go look at them if you have time this week. If she doesn't give them to us in our homework, you do your own research on that. But the one that always pops into my head is the one where Jesus stood during one of the feasts, and he said, "Come to me," and because they were doing a water libation on that last day of the Day of Atonement feast. And he stood up and he said, "Come to me, and out of my belly shall come rivers of living water." And so when you think of it from that perspective, now you take that into the temple, and who's going to be in the temple? Jesus. He's going to literally, physically be seated in the temple on his throne. And what we believe the throne is the Ark of the Covenant. Well, it's the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark is not there. And later there are other passages that says the Ark won't even come to your mind. It won't even matter to you. It's the mercy seat that is his throne. And where he places his feet, then they come and they pour the blood sacrifices by his feet in the Old Testament, that he says, "This is the place of my feet." We saw that also in an earlier chapter here that we've just come out of. So I would recommend you go in and do a little bit of look about the idea of water for this particular subject, and living water in particular, and just run through for fun, and maybe copy and paste them onto a sheet and get a nice accumulation of verses that talk about living water and how the subject matter is used. What is the inference? Because God has used water over and over through history concerning a spiritual teaching that he's giving to Israel. So he's almost always associated with water and living water, life-giving water. Okay?
So, because I didn't have the internet and was just doing this, I did focus on water. And God was so good in that we would climb mountains, and at the very top would be a gorgeous lake, and there is a stream flowing from the top of the mountain, and it starts small, and then it's like a waterfall by the time you get to the end of the trail. And it's crystal clear. And as I was reading this, then I was going to verses about him being the living water. And that's going to be an actual thing, physical thing that we can see. And the whole world would be able to see in the millennium.
Yes, yes, it'll be beautiful.
Yeah,
And now when you say that, though, I also consider the idea of how that whole imagery of that water coming from the temple defies the natural order of how things happen too, where a trickle doesn't usually become a gushing river, not normally, unless there's more water sources coming in. But in this, but you've got gravity, and you've also got other water sources probably feeding into that gives it more water. But with the temple, it's a temple, and he just noticed a little trickle by his feet, but it becomes that great river, and that kind of defies the natural way that usually it's a big flood and then it trickles down and dries up, right? But we're doing it in reverse. What a God thing. What a cool thing. Okay, so water, and we'll talk in detail more about that water and what it does for us. Then we see the land. Now, in 13 to 20, concerning the land, what is he giving to them? What's the key word in 13 to 20? Certainly land is in there. Boundary or borders, okay? Now, when it's saying the land and boundary and borders, what can you define for me exactly what that's talking about? The land borders for what?
it's the inheritance among the 12 tribes.
Okay, so it's the grand total of the land of Israel itself, right? So it's not talking here in chapter 47 about each portion given to the 12. It's saying in totality, this is Israel's land and border. And so it gave you north, south, east, west. What were some of the fixtures that were given to us that would be really clearly easy to identify in that day when they do this? Yes, things like the sea and the Great Sea and all the way down to Egypt. So the boundaries, the way that God has set this up for us to be able to know what this is he did it by giving us geographical points. I think about when we used to drive to places before we had GPS back in the day, right? And someone would say, when you see the Costco or the what was the gas stations called back then? Not Costco. It was something like that. But anyway, a certain gas station. Or when you see this yellow sign, or when you see the purple house, which would be odd, right? But they would tell you by land points that are fixtures that are kind of permanent, at least temporarily permanent for us, but they aren't going anywhere. And when I come to town, I can look for that fixture, and I know, oh, that's where I need to turn right or left or whatever. So that's exactly what God is doing here. He's giving them identifiable fixtures that are on the land area that they will be able to mark easily and look for. And so that'll help them. Okay. All right, so let's title it then. For 47, it looks to me like then, how many titles basically do we have? What subjects do we have here?
Water and boundaries.
That's right, water and boundaries. And you almost could just title it water and boundaries. Although, let's beef it up a little bit. Okay, let's see. So we need our theme. And what is the title for this? The first part of it's going to be about the water. So what are you going to say about the water in your title? Where does the water come from?
The sanctuary.
Okay, and are there any identifying qualities about that water that you saw in the text? Comes from the temple or from the sanctuary, and?
Well,
Yes, it's living water. I think that's a really good qualifier that's unique, it's distinct, and when you come back later to look at your observation worksheets in Ezekiel, you're going to see that and go, oh, yes, I see that. I remember this, that's what this is about. And that's the whole point to your titling of your chapters, is to get unique titles that are distinct from the chapter before and the chapter before, so that as you're moving along, you can later come back and go, oh, there it is, it's right there, I remember this.
is that word living?
Yes.
I didn't
Yes.
see living. I saw living creature.
Well, see, it says, verse 9. It will come about that every living creature which swarms in every place where the river goes will live. Okay? So it's water that gives life. It's living water. You're right. I'm making a play on it a little bit there. But in essence, that is what is happening. And he says, and there will be very many fish, for these waters go there, and others become fresh. So everything will live where the water goes. So the water is life-giving. Now, you could title it that way, life-giving water. That would work too. Okay? Whatever makes you think of it. So we're going to title this first part, The Temple's Living Water. That's the first subject. And then the second one is about the what? Yeah. The boundaries of whose land? Mm-hmm. Okay. Because that's distinct from chapter 48, right? Because in 48, it isn't about the boundaries of the land mass. It's about what? Yeah, and the allotments that each of them are going to get, and who gets them, and even the placement of them on the land in this order, and these things are here and there. So that makes it distinct. This one's about the living water coming out of the temple and the boundaries of Israel's land. Okay, so let's do our paragraphs then. We see paragraphs 1 and 2 is the first one. Yeah, a direction, and it's also described for us as a what in the beginning.
Where it's flowing down under.
Yeah, and does it describe the water? How much water?
Trickle.
A trickle. So we have a trickle. Do you think that's important? Oh yeah, because why is it important in your title for that to show at the beginning it's a trickle? Because what happens later? It becomes this huge river. Okay. So it's a trickle of water that comes. And I don't know if this is important or not, but the south of the temple. Okay. A trickle of water comes from south of the temple. Well, probably that's direction. They would say, if you're facing the house, let's see, east, so east, north, south,
That would be coming from
so
the west
east.
side.
You know what? I think it has to do with the direction he was walking. You remember when it talked about where he came from? He came in did he come in the south door? It says, okay, he took me to the house flowing. He brought me by way of the north gate and led me around the outside of the outer gate by way of the gate that faces east. And behold, the water was trickling from the south side. So whatever it is, it's south. Okay, because it says south. So it's on the south side of the temple. That's where the water is coming from. And I like that. Now, and where did you see the right?
On verse 1.
Then he brought me to the door.
From the right side of the house.
See, mine doesn't say that. What translation are you using?
This is another direction.
Yeah, it's the end of verse 1.
It is.
End of verse
Oh, there it is. From the right side of the house, from south of the altar. Okay, all right. All I know, did you mark that as a key word?
I marked both of those, the right side and the south side would be question marks.
Oh, okay. See, I would not, I didn't pick up on that, so I haven't really thought it through, and I'm not quite sure what the question is. But I'm looking at directional information, north, south, east, and west. It's given over and over throughout almost all of this that we look at. Anywhere there's a directional, north, south, east, or west, I marked that. And right from the right side, is it in perspective to where Ezekiel was standing at the moment, or is it? Does he consider the right side the south side? I don't know. hold on a second. Let me look here. I have one thing I can look at, I think. South side. Okay, so the south side he's considering that the right. He came in the north. So he came in the north. He came around.
But according to our maps, the south is the left side, the north is the right.
Well, if you're looking straight on, yes, but that's why I'm telling you, Carol, it has to be from his perspective of where he's standing or something. But he clarifies it by giving you a direction, north, south, east, and west. And that's the important thing. So that's why I'm saying I think I would just read past that piece of information and go north, south, east, west, because that's what the only other way you can do this, Carol, is for you to sit down and draw pictures out of this. He came in this way. He came around here. Now, which way is he standing for it to be on his right, and is that right his south? You have to make it work so that his right side is the south, because he says it's the south. Not necessarily. He just has to turn this way or this way or this way or this way, and then you get it to your right. So you just have to turn his body until you get it to the right. I don't personally, it was flowing down from the right side of the house. Okay, when you're, I think I know. I think I might know. Okay, no. I just thought about it. You know, when you're sitting on a throne, the right hand and the left hand of God, not Ezekiel's right or left hand. Maybe that's it. At the right hand, and if the water's throwing out of his right hand. So now let me go back and look at this real quick and see if I figured that out, if I did that right. And the right hand would be, yeah, because he's sitting east. Right side would be south. That's right. Huh. So it's Jesus's right hand, right side. Oh, I'm so glad I thought. So I've been redeemed. I was feeling really bad because I hate it when I leave people confused. It's Jesus's right hand because Jesus sits on his throne, which means he sits facing the east, because that's where he entered in through the east gate. He's facing the sea. That's where his temple, his throne would be, and to his right, out of the right-hand side, which, that is such a great picture. Oh, my goodness. Okay, what is the right hand of God associated with?
Jesus.
Well, Jesus too, but what is the right hand of Jesus associated with? What's the right hand associated with? Power and strength, right? Might. So if you think about that, Jesus is on his throne. To his right, the water is trickling down out of the temple, heading toward the, was it going toward the east? It was going toward the Sea of the Araba, yes, so it had to be going eastward. So it's trickling out and going toward the east at this point, and literally it becomes this mighty thing. So it's just talking about the source is Jesus, his throne room is the source. It's from his right hand, power, authority, strength, right? And it's out of his belly comes rivers of living water. Yeah, there's a lot of pictures that I missed. Oof. But I'm hoping to pick them up next week, and hopefully it'll be somewhere in the homework. Yeah. But I actually had not picked up on that right thing at all. I just looked for directional north, south, east, and west. Bad Katie. Not a good thing there. All right. What is there any other insight that you see in 1 and 2? So it's trickling out from his right side by way of the gate that faces east. So it is going out to the east. Okay, 3 to 5.
The depth of the water?
Yes. And what happens to the trickle? Yeah, the trickle of water, trickle enlarges. I'm using my own word here because I didn't know how to get it into a concise thing. Enlarges to become what?
In that water this river.
Yeah, it becomes a river. Doesn't it say that?
Oh, it does, a river.
A river. Becomes a river. Could not be forded. Okay, so that would be some points that we need to talk about. So it's a river. Becomes a river. Let's do this. Okay, it becomes deep enough to swim in verse 5, right? And then it says it's a river that could not be forded. So who looked up forded? Is that a word in our vocabulary these days? Not really. So tell me what the word forded means. Did anybody look it up? Okay, forded. I'll give it to you. And it might be in homework this week, and if so, I'm sorry I'm jumping ahead on you. 5674, ABAR is the Hebrew. Can anybody take a guess at what you think it is? What it means? Can't be crossed. Oh, you guys are Greek or Hebrew scholars. It can't be traversed, it can't be crossed over, can't be passed through. And I think a lot of it has to do with also the swiftness of the water movement. It sounded to me like this idea of a river that's forded, that's moving so quickly that, well, for sure you can't walk through it, where before he's been walking, right? First it was a trickle, then it was ankle deep, then it was to the knees. So it was a progressive thing. Now there are some beautiful sermons online that talk about your spiritual walk with God and these different levels of water and what they can spiritually mean, how we can take them and make imagery out of them. It's not what the text says, but we can definitely make some personal appliance of that concept to our own personal life or application to our life. So what does it make you think of when you think about the idea of the water growing deeper and deeper in that way? Is it a positive or a negative? A positive, okay. And part of it has to do with the grand finale at the end of this, right? When we get to 6 to 12. Let's see what's in 6 to 12. Concerning the water, what do we have?
Fresh water, living creatures.
Yeah. Okay. So the water gives life, and then he goes on to say everywhere it goes. Okay, and this is where I have a very lengthy list on things here, but it's waters that these waters they go out of the temple and head eastward. And get to where? Excuse me.
Into the sea.
Into the sea. So what sea? That's the Dead Sea.
Yeah, fresh.
That's just amazing. Waters go eastward to the Dead Sea. What happens to the Dead Sea? Yeah, the Dead Sea becomes fresh water. Okay, what else do we know about that sea, that water? Sorry, you guys, choking again.
And every living creature which swarms in every place.
That just blows us away because for most of us, if we've not been to the Dead Sea, which some of us have, but even if you haven't and you've watched any kind of documentaries on TV or whatever, it is dead as a doornail. There is nothing that can live in that. The only thing that it's actually good for is the salts and the minerals in there are really good for your body for healing. So in a way, God provided healing waters for this generation of things, but later he's going to do it in a different way, right? Those waters are going to become fresh water, and the waters were going to teem with fish. A pastor many years ago said it will be a fisherman's paradise, right? But what does the shores of it do?
So everything will live where the river goes. The trees,
And in verse 11, what about the shores of it?
swamps and marshes will not become dry.
So the shores are going to retain a swamp area. And I think this is really cool. Have you guys seen the pictures about this lately? They're even showing right now how where the Dead Sea is right now, that there are little pockets of pooling of water on the outside of the water's edge, where little pockets of water are brimming up from where the Dead Sea was. And I'm like, oh, that's the picture I'm getting of it, where it's like there's these little pockets of water that are going to stay on the side that aren't touched by the living water that's coming from the throne, but it's pooled in its own isolated spots along the shore. And then what are they going to do with those pockets of salty water? Yeah, for salt. And how important is salt to the human body? One of the things I just realized, I did not know it all these years, but the table salt that we use is absolutely horrible for us. There's a Celtic salt that I started purchasing just recently that retains all of its natural minerals, and what happens is your body does not causes inflammation from your table salt. And it's not just because you're eating salt, it's because the salt has been refined, kind of like our refined flours. They took out all the healthy minerals that helps your body break it down and utilize it correctly. So if you have trouble with that, I recommend Celtic salt, CELTIC.
Different than sea salt?
Yeah. Well, I think so. You need to research it. I don't know enough. I just knew this one thing. I listened to a doctor on YouTube, and of course, you know, all YouTube doctors know everything.
Yeah.
But anyway, she's really good. She's a natural healer. Anyway, I recommend, and what she had to say made perfect sense to me. So I bought Celtic salt for my house now, and I use it when I salt my food. I still use my other salt for other kinds of things, depending on what I'm doing, like boiling eggs or something. But yeah, I think they do. I ordered it on Amazon because I wasn't sure, but when I got to the store, I saw some there. And of course, it's more expensive, but if you're just shaking it for table salt, but what happens is your body can break that down. So and the reason I bring that all up is because here, what God shows us is, what is the human body going to be like in that day? What did we just learn? For those who are still alive in that day, in their flesh, it's the same body. You still are going to need all those natural healing agencies and just the natural minerals and such that we have in our foods, things like the salts and I don't remember what the other parts of the potassium maybe, and I don't know what the other pieces of it. She said it in the video, but I thought it was very interesting. And I just thought, oh, that's so cool, because that's just what we're seeing here. God is going to provide salt for the people who are still in their flesh and need to keep their body in health in that regard. And then besides that, so this is a health benefit, right? The fish obviously is a miracle thing, and we can get our fish from anywhere, but God is showing that his water produces life. It takes what's dead and makes it alive. Spiritual truth in that. The shores are going to retain swamps for salt. And then there's going to be trees right, that grow along the side. Or along the river side. And what are the trees going to be for?
Fruit for food and leaves for healing.
For food and leaves for healing. So if the salt wasn't enough to take care of you, you get to have the leaves, and I don't know what that means. Will we dry them and make herbal teas out of them and they give health? I don't know. It's going to be very interesting though, right? Producing food, their leaves for healing. Also, I thought it was also interesting about these trees, their leaves are not going to what? They're not going to wither. And about the fruit. The fruit is what? Never going to fail. That's pretty mind-blowing. That means seasonally, year-round, it will bear every month. So what does that tell us about the environment of, it sounds like to me the Garden of Eden again, where there's a perfect temperature year-round. It does sound, now I might be wrong, but it sounds like it's not going to snow. You know, we're not going to have typhoons that are going to wipe everything out. It's going to be a garden that's lush with perfect temperature year-round. No ice storms to take out your electricity and make your poor cattle freeze to death. Yeah. Okay, fruit will not fail. And I tell you, I bet that for any farmer, that would be like, oh, yay. The leaves will not wither. That tells me either they're evergreens or there is no fall. I'm not sure which. All right. They will bear fruit every month. That's 12. That's amazing. Bear fruit 12 months out of the year. Okay, so that takes care of the water.
So I was thinking, and this is just guessing, that there are going to be unbelievers and they are going to see this living water coming from the throne, and they're supposedly going to know that Jesus is sitting on the throne and ruling and reigning, right? So they're going to see fresh water giving life. The trees are life, the fish are life, living water. And then they're going to see these marshes that don't get the living water, and they're dead.
And it's going to be, I would think, not only that, I also still maintain the idea that it trickles out and then it becomes this gushing thing. And you're like, this defies gravity and your thinking on how things go. And how does that little trickle keep that water as a flowing river like that is healthy for all the fish that'll be in it, that can't traverse over it. It continues, so the water level will never change. It maintains. We all know about lakes. If you live on Lake Austin or anywhere like that, it subsides, and sometimes you were waterfront property, now you're not. Yeah. But this will not have that happen. This water will always be moving and vibrant and full of life.
So it'll be kind of a testimony to unbelievers.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Again, just like the temple and the sacrifices, a testimony. Everything is going to be used by God for spiritual truth messages, for object lessons. We're going to go back to object lessons in the millennial kingdom. Did you guys know that? Do you remember the flannel board and the object lessons we used to do? Or the pastor would walk up on the stage and bring a chair and set it down and talk about your faith and how you have to sit in that chair to actually have active faith.
So the trickle will be there for 1,000 years running down into the Dead Sea.
Mm-hmm.
Which will be a life.
1,000 years.
Isn't that amazing? That's amazing. And the water never ceases. It continues to be healing water. For anything it touches, it gives life to it. Anything that touches it. This makes me say, I want to go get baptized in that water if I'm a human flesh person. If I'm there in my flesh in that millennial kingdom, I want to go there and have my Jordan baptism.
But in her healing,
Okay, let's put that on there. The water gives, the water, well, the water gives life everywhere it goes. The water, and that's speaking, I think, of the I think that's speaking of healing of the body, healing of the water itself down there. The Dead Sea water heals. The trees are going to start to grow there. There's no trees there at all right now. It's just barren. It's just muddy, kind of clay banks in that. When you go down there, there's nothing there. And it's receding and receding and receding. It is, I'm trying to remember, is it the lowest planet Earth? There are, I think it is, and it's like 1,328 whatever's below sea level, and others, like we have, my husband mentioned a couple of places that he also thought were deep, and he thought maybe they would be equivalent. I'm going, no way, the others are like 58 below, and this is 1,002, yeah. I was like, holy moly. So it'd be fun, Google it, how far down, how many, below sea level, how far down does the sea go? I've got it on a sheet here somewhere. If I could find it, I would share that with you because it was just interesting. It was one of those little tidbits of information, like, okay, it doesn't matter a whole lot in the Bible study scheme of things, but it was interesting. My husband is the one that got me thinking on it, and he had a video on or something that caught my attention. And I went, I wonder how many deep waters there are and how far down and how it ranks, Well, it's the lowest point. I don't see it in here. I'll have to look it up.
We were talking about last week about how the whole topography had changed.
Yes.
And I found this picture online, and it shows all of this area, and here's the temple.
Mm-hmm.
All of that
Is raised up.
So if it's all raised up, then this water will flow down.
It will, but it's a trickle. And to make it be more, there has to be more. If you only have a trickle, water sources will dry up as they leave. If there's not more water added into it, right? So that, in my thinking, if I turn my water hose on and a trickle goes, the further away from the water hose, it just soaks in and it's gone, right? But this water is going to, for what strange reason we don't know, and this is where I think it's a supernatural picture, is it increases in volume and depth gradually from the ankles to the knees to the hips. Then it's a river that can't be forged. And it goes down into the sea, and when it gets there, there's so much water there, it makes that Dead Sea, which was salty, fresh living water. Yeah. Right, it's what it shows, exactly. And that's the part to me is a supernatural thing. I loved that. That's a cool picture.
It is a cool picture.
Yeah.
It shows the trees. In my mind, Kristen and I were talking about that a while ago. I thought a tree on each side.
Mm-hmm.
This is the trees, the whole
All down the, right. And I've seen another picture that where that water in another, I think it's in Zechariah, it also goes the other direction to the Mediterranean Sea. It does not make the Mediterranean Sea fresh water, however, but there are trees also all along that water going to the other direction, which means it's life-giving for the land where the people of Israel will be living, which is really cool. Oh my gosh, and if you haven't looked at that, if you have not gone and read that, you might want to go into Revelation 21 and 22 and reread that again and look at the similarities between what we will have here and there. Now, there are some differences. We did this last week when I took you through and said, don't confuse the millennial kingdom with the new heaven and the new earth time, because it's going to be far superior when we go to the new heaven and the new earth. But we are getting a glimpse in the millennial kingdom time of what God intended for the earth to be like for Adam and Eve and all the generations from there forward, right? Both in the way it's ordered, the way that it's governed, but also the beauty of it, that even maybe the temperature of the earth and not having all these things that we have, going on right now. So, all right, 13 to 20, we got to move along. We're going to run out of time. But let's do the next part. 13 to 20, now we make a switcheroo. We went from the water in 1 to 12, and now we're going to switch to the land. And this is going to cover 13 to 23. All right. What do we see in this first segment here? I went 13 to 20. It seems to me like they kind of had it broken, it looks like, with these bullets. Yeah. But I don't think it's necessary to break it down that much. What I think they did is they went north, south, east, west. Yeah. And that's how they tried to break it down even more. I think that complicates it in our mind when we're looking at things. We know it's going to do north, south, east, west. We understand that. What we're just looking for is the bigger picture on this. And so one of the things I did pick up on, did you pick up on verse 14, a key word there? And who is speaking? Who's the I in that?
You shall divide it for an inheritance.
Read verse 14. You shall divide it for an inheritance, each one equally with the other, for I swore. Who's the I? God. And what does to swear mean? What does that mean he did? He made a covenant. So that word swore needs to be marked like you mark the word covenant, however you've been marking that in past. It's one of those key words, just like God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. Covenant is another one that you mark the same no matter where you are in the Bible. They're always marked the same, and that way you have continuity, and no matter where you drop in, you see it. And that word swore, I swore to give this land to you, that's speaking of that Abrahamic covenant that he promised. I swore to give it to your forefathers, and this land shall fall to you as an inheritance. So he's not only saying I swore it, he's actually now saying, and it will happen, right? I loved that. That was really cool. So in that case, when he says I swore, what you can say is then God is decreeing this, right?
Yeah, but he already decreed it.
By covenant, He did do it, and he's restating it. Did you notice how many times when we did our Genesis study, how every time it went to the new patriarch, the Abraham, then Isaac, then Jacob, then God would make another covenant with them? It was the same covenant before, but it was just reiterating. So it wasn't a new covenant, it was a restatement of the covenant. I see this in the same way. He's restating it, he's just decreeing, I made this covenant, now I'm telling you I'm going to fulfill it. And this is the time I will fulfill it, right here. So God decrees by covenant what? At that time in history, he's going to give them what?
Each one equally with the other.
And he's speaking in bigger words, though. The key word is the word boundary or border, right? Yes. So he's decreeing the boundary and the division for the land of Israel. So he's setting apart what landmass belongs to Israel at that time in history. So there's not going to be this argument over this belongs to this group, that belongs to that. No, this is the landmass. And then when you get to the next chapter, he's going to go in and actually subdivide it for each tribe. But here he's just giving you the geography from this sea to this sea, from this river to this river. And this is your land area. This is what I call Israel. And this is the land I gave to you. Now, this is the point I wanted to bring to you with this. I went in and did some work on this part of it because I thought it was interesting. We'll talk about a little bit more when we get into Genesis 29 and 30 about the sons. But here, this Abrahamic land promise, you might want to make a note on your observation worksheet just next to this area here where it starts talking about the land. Genesis 15, 18 to 21. That's where God made the covenant to Abraham, and he tells him the land area. I'm going to read it real quick. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your descendants I have given this land, from the river of Egypt as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, and then he gives you some people groups as to who's living there at that time in history, so that you could also identify the land area. The Canaanite, the Kizite, the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Pezerite, and the Rephaim. And the Amorite and the Canaanite and the Girishite and the Jebusite. All the ites. Okay, so what's cool about that is then you and I could, if we wanted to have, because there's too many guesses kind of out there through artwork and through mapping that you go online, and this map doesn't match this map, right? We've talked about that, and it's frustrating. Go in and just look. One of the things God told Abraham way back in Genesis 12 was, "Go now, walk the length of the land," right? And so if you can find a map, and I did find one, the only part that you have to eliminate is the part where Abraham in the storyline goes down into Egypt because there's a drought in the land. We know Egypt is not given to Israel. But I found 2 maps online, and both of them give kind of Abraham sojourning on the land. Hold on, let me see if I can get this to lay flat so that it will be easier. Okay, so in here we see this top one, you see him going all the way down into Egypt. You have to eliminate that. The bottom one doesn't go as far into Egypt, but he goes all the way to what's the river. Now there's a question about what that river is, but I don't think it's the Nile as what most people are saying. It's this other one. Let me see. He says, the waters of Meribah Kadesh in verse 19, to the brook of Egypt, and then to the great sea, that being the Mediterranean Sea. So it's still a little bit confusing to me, but at least what I can see here is the areas that he walked. Go, Abraham, and walk the land I'm giving to you. And so by looking at a map and just seeing the places he walked, the places he went, you can definitely identify certain cities that are mentioned through the historical record in Genesis, and you can begin to say, okay, that belongs to Israel, that belongs to Israel, that belongs to Israel. And it actually widens your perspective. One of the things that's really interesting is here he comes down from Haran. Here's all the way up Haran. He comes down, he starts here, Al-Hammam, which is one of the ones that is listed. You're talking Syria. So Syria, parts of Syria are going to be Israel's land as far as I can see. And then when he mentions the river, one of the rivers he mentions is the Euphrates. This is the Euphrates right here. So you have when you look at this, you go, okay, so this takes you all the way up into Syria, and then he begins to parse it out downward. And it also shows on both of these where he's traversing is also on the other side of the Dead Sea. Now, many of the charts that I've looked at, when they parse out the land in chapter 48, it stops at the Jordan River, and it keeps everything on the left side of the Jordan River. But remember, we talked about that burial place, 𝐏𝐚𝐫𝐭,
Yes.
right? And it says they're going to have to come through 𝐏𝐚𝐫𝐭 to the temple, right? And as far as we can tell by looking at that point, it's on the side of Jordan, where Jordan is presently. Well, when you look at his traversing, he traversed in that part of the land as well. So I might be wrong, but these are 2 different maps from 2 different people groups, and they both show this traversing of the land is on both the right and the left of the Jordan, which means the country of Jordan, part of that is going to belong to them. And it takes them all the way down into the Negev. So that's pretty interesting. So anyway, it's one way. It's just what happened is I got stuck. How do we know which map is right? And I went, God told him to walk the breadth and the length of the land that he gave him. So if we go in and just look at the cities where he went, we should be able to map those out and get at least scripturally a more accurate understanding. It may still fall short, but at least we aren't limited. One of the things is the Euphrates River is way up there.
Was Gilead
Yes, yeah. I'm seeing on this, Dara Hammond. I don't see Gilead on this particular map, but that's, let me look over here. It does not mention it on this one either. But again, it's not so important that we know exactly. What we know is it's land. This is what we do know. It's a lot more land mass than they have right now. It's like quadruple bigger than that. And it goes much further north, it goes much further south, and it expands to the right and to the left, which is why when he gives such a large land portion just to his temple, because there's so much still land available, it's small in proportion to what God has given to the nation on the whole, and it works.
And so, maybe we'll talk about this later in probably a whole study of the significance of land.
Oh yeah, and land is a good subject. What about the right hand is a good subject? What about living water as a good subject?
But the covenant of the land from the very beginning
Right.
is so important.
Well, there's Romans, I've quoted it already before in here, and I think it's in one of your charts, but it talked about I think it was last week, the earth is going to shout for joy when the sons of God attain their liberty, because they're waiting for their liberty too. Meaning that in the millennial reign, they get their liberty. They get their health back. Thorns and thistles apparently cease. So it's again another topographical change to the earth that's going to happen. And things are going to be, the water's going to give life, and the earth is going to be abundant. And I think there's going to be either no resistance or very little resistance to man's hand cultivating the soil, because the weather's going to be perfect, the rain sources will be perfect. It's just I can't wait to taste the fruit in that day that's growing right on the tree. We lived in Turkey. We got fresh fruits and vegetables there in that fertile crescent area of the world. Oh my goodness, the best fruits and vegetables ever. And what we get here in our grocery stores, when I first came back from living all those years, and we were there for a long time, but living that long in Turkey, and would come back to the States, I could hardly eat anything. It just tasted so bad to me. Now I'm on board with it all fine, but yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go. Michael's gonna come and finish up.
You're just not feeling good, huh?
I can stuff it out, tough it out.
I am so sorry you're not feeling well, Kristen.
Make you guys sick of your own.
Well, yeah, please don't. That would be good. I'm so sorry.
He told me to just leave and don't be here.
All right, well, thank you. Hopefully nothing bad will happen. All right, somebody keep an eye on those ladies there. Okay, so God is decreeing here because of the covenant, by covenant, the boundary.
What was the reference that God told Abraham to walk that?
It's on my chart. Hold on. I did. Okay, it's in Genesis 12. Where did I put it? It starts in Genesis 12, 1 through 4, something like that.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, there. Oh, that's where I wrote it, on the top of that chart. See there? I stick all my little notes in different places, and I don't get it all together. Okay, the boundary and division. And this, by the way, what you're taking pictures of is going to come to you by email.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. I've got these 2 maps of the journeys of Abraham coming to you attached with the chart. Sometimes it's nice if someone will just hand it to you so you can look at it. And then it motivates you to go, I need to go Google this myself and see what I can come up with, because there might even be someone out there who's brainy. They're like a real brainiac, and they spend a lot of time doing that research. And then they might have a better map. And if they do, bring it to class and share it with the rest of us, because I would love to see it. Okay, so God decrees by covenant the boundary and division of Israel's land. Okay, and then he goes on, he said it's going to be divided equally in verse 20. He says the west, am I in the right place? Oh, there in 21. I went to the wrong place, yeah. No, it is in 14. You shall divide it for an inheritance, each one equally with the other, for I swore to give it to your fathers. Okay, so this is really interesting. In the middle of this generic big picture of this is the landmass and this is what's going to be given to you all. When you get it, you're going to divide it equally. Nobody's going to get cheated. Nobody's going to get more than another. It's going to be fair. We're going to, do you remember Mom used to give kids, I have one stick of gum left. This is back when sticks of gum were around. And she'd have to fold it right in half and measure it and get it just right and tear it in half. And then you each got equal pieces. Otherwise, what did the kids do? They would cry. God is saying it's going to be equally divided. And I think that's pretty cool.
This map does not look like it's equally divided.
I know, but what we know is the text says it is. So regardless of what you're looking at there, the text says it will be equally divided. And he gives all that to you in right here in 13 to 20. Okay, this is the land I swore to your forefathers to give it. These are the boundaries of the land, and then he gives north, east, south, and west. And I'm not going to write all that down because I just think it's not that important unless you're really digging into some deep work on that. Okay? And then, so 21 to 23 is our last paragraph here. And this was interesting. This is like thrown in at the tail end of this. It seems out of place, and yet I think it's really neat because what do you see God doing here? Who's he talking about? Aliens that are doing what?
Who stay in your midst.
Living amongst and born, or some are born, but someone came in to begin with, right, that wasn't born. They were brought in. So when they're brought in and they're giving birth to children, what does that tell you that relationship is? How do you get a baby? You get married. Certainly in God's kingdom you will, right? So what he's saying is those who are living among you that stay in your midst, in other words, they're dwelling there and living there, they're not coming in and staying independent of you. And he goes on to say, and he says they are going to have sons. They're to be to you as the native born among the sons of Israel. They shall be allotted an inheritance with you among the tribes of Israel. So it sounds to me like they've come in and coveted in some form or fashion with the people that they're going to be living amongst. Even though they're not Jews, they're Gentiles, and they're coming there to live among them. And God's saying if they've done that and they've affixed themselves to you and they're dwelling among you and they have fulfilled all the requirements to be among you, whatever those requirements would be. He's saying when the land is divided, because we're talking about when this initially gets divided, this is at the end of the tribulation. Some of these people have come into faith during that time frame, but these are people who are still in their flesh, many of these, although, I mean, there's going to be the resurrected ones too, but it doesn't seem to me like he really talks about them much. He's really talking more about the ones who are still alive and living. And he's saying the aliens that are living among you. Now, when you think about what's going on in Israel today, do you see Gentiles who have moved to Israel and are really committed to being among them, maybe even have married into their families? And even if they haven't married into their families, they've developed covenantal type relationships through business and through support and loyalty toward one another. And they're there, living among them, right? And what does he say then to those who are like that, and yet they're aliens?
Give them an inheritance.
They get an allotment, but they don't get a separate allotment, do they? What is their allotment affixed to?
Among the inheritance with you among the tribes of Israel.
There you go. So they don't get a separate allotment, but if I'm affixed to the tribe of Dan, or I'm affixed to the tribe of Joseph, or Naphtali, of that tribe, whatever they inherit, it's my inheritance too. Isn't that awesome? That's really cool. So that's another journey of spiritual insights. You can say, okay, so what is the picture in that for us? And we've seen through actually throughout all history, what is the thing that God did in the first, the fulfillment of the spring feast? At the end, when they did the waving of the 2 loaves of bread on the day of Pentecost, what was that? Those 2 loaves of bread representing? Jews and Gentiles in one body. The waving of them in one body.
So this doesn't mean the aliens
Get a separate piece of, no,
individually. This is the inheritance of the whole.
that's exactly what it is.
So it just authorizes them to
To stay there and for that to be their land as well. Whatever tribe they affix themselves to, if you're of the tribe of Joseph or of the tribe of Judah, you will inherit Judah's a plotted land or a proportion of land with them, the right to stay there, so that you don't have to be kicked out of the land or kicked off the land. You will be there with them. That's really cool. Yeah. Okay. 21 to 23 then is titled about the aliens.
And that could be a whole nother story, the topic alien, how God cares about aliens, talks about aliens throughout Scripture.
I had a hard time making this title. It's very, very long because you have to really clarify or crystallize. Aliens who live among Israel shall inherit with them the tribe they dwell with. So they're not getting a separate plot of land. They are getting the plot of land of the 12 tribes, whichever of those 12 tribes they are living among. They inherit with that tribe. So that way you still maintain 12 tribes and 12 plots of land. That's what God promised by covenant. So isn't that cool? See again how God manages to always keep his word, but also fulfilling promises, but yet not violating his personal attributes of fairness and love. And also the whole point is he came to save the whole world, not just the Gentile, or not just the Jews. Okay. All right. All right, that gives us a pretty good. So how did what I did with you here line up with how you titled and segmented things? Pretty close? Did you get pretty close on your titling? Yeah? Did you catch this last one pretty good? Okay, that's an important one to know. They don't inherit separate land. That's for them. They inherit with that tribe. Okay. All right, super. Then we've accomplished that one. Let's move on to 48. I'm just going to put over here, I'm going to put these. Oh, is that our friend? I forgot to write this down when we were talking about it. I should have gotten it up here because some people are going to need this, especially if they come in 43 to 44, worship in the temple, and then 45 to 48. That takes us all the way to the end, land around the temple. They don't talk in this text at all about the land of the nations so much, although there are going to be nations in the land. But okay, Abrahamic land promise is found in Genesis 15. So you can go and look at that, 15, 18, to 21, and it is again, it's mapped out for you by water resources, the Mediterranean Sea and the Dead Sea, but it's also, and the Euphrates River, and then it's also mapped out in that passage by the tribes of people that were living upon the land at that time, which then you could go back in history and you could see the general areas where they were living, right? And then you know what land is supposed to be. Then secondarily, you're going to go and you're going to look at a map, and that, give me that reference on there. It was Genesis 12, was it 1 to 4? Okay, 1 to 4. Look at the areas that Abram walked. Because God told him, go walk the width and length of the land I shall give you. So that's really going to be even more than that. It's like Genesis 12 through maybe 18 or something like that. You could look you could expand that. Genesis, so you might want to look at Genesis chapter 12 through, I'm guessing here. I know he talks about, in 21 even, it goes to Mount Moriah. That's where his son is going to be, remember he takes,
So there's not a 12:21.
no, not a 12, chapters 12 to 21. Yeah. I was trying to narrow it down, make it shorter, but really any of the area that you see Abraham going and traversing on or living on, any place in the historical record of Genesis, that's the land God promised him. The only time it isn't is when he says, and he went to Egypt for blah, 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 but he always returns. So we know Egypt is not part of Israel's land, but all these other places he went to, then you could plot that on a map and say, this land is what would have been, or is supposed to be anyway, for Israel.
God promised Abram, go, and I will show you the land.
Yes.
So he did. God showed him the land.
That's what he did. That's exactly and that was my point to doing this. So this Abrahamic land promise is stated in 15 and then demonstrated when you go into these other chapters. He told him in Genesis 12, 1 to 4, go and look at it. And then in chapters 12 to 21, you see him looking at it and living some places. He puts up altars in different places. He actually dwells in certain areas, like at Shechem and all these different places. So, all right, so now we're in 48. What is our theme?
So I didn't get to do 48, but the frequent words are border of the tribe.
Again, border. Now this time it's borders of the tribes specifically, not just the border of Israel, the land mass of Israel, but the borders of each of the tribes. Okay, very good. So these are the borders. And let's see if I can find it. Okay, when you get into the second part here in 8 to 20, it's talking about one of the borders containing what allotment? The allotment for who?
The allotment which you have set apart.
In verses 8 to 20. And who's it set apart for?
For the Lord.
For the Lord. That one's the holy allotment, right? In 8 to 20. So it's allotments that are being given out in here. It's land allotments, right? So we have a theme. Okay. And you might even want to put on here, within the borders of Israel's land, just to clarify. if that helps you to understand why it's unique or different from the other chapters that you've looked at. This one actually takes Israel's land allotments, but the land allotments are within the border of Israel's allotted national land, the land that they're going to live on. Okay. All right, so Israel's land boundaries, the land allotments is next. Okay, so 1 to 7 is our first paragraph. I hope that Kristen is feeling okay. She's had a lot of sickness lately. Okay, 1 to 7. There you go. You did so good. How many are there? 7 tribe portions. And where are they located in relationship to the holy allotment? North. North of the holy allotment. So again, what's going to be interesting is there's going to be a definitive, the way that they lay this out for us, they're saying this is your fixed location, the sanctuary of God and the holy allotment, the 25,000 cubic squares footage. So from here then north there are 7 tribes. So now and so then the next part of it will tell us where the rest is. But so 1 to 7 talks about those 7 tribe portions that are going to be north of the holy allotment. One of the things we know already is that they are going to be equally divided, right? We talked about that already. Give me the reference on that. It may not even be in 1 to 7 area, but it was in the last chapter. Let's go back. 47:14, right? Just so you have that, 47:14, equally divided among these 7, actually among all 12, equally divided. What else do we know? Where does this allotment begin? Yep. And geographically, where are you on the relationship to Israel's land? The far north, right? All the way to the far north border, and then you begin to progressively come down, and it gives you each particular tribe's name, which I think is really cool. So it's very orderly in the way that he did this. So it begins in the far north.
And it always goes from east to west.
And comes.
And all the other maps, where it talks about the divisions of the tribes, they're not equally divided.
No, I know it. I know. And that's where I think that do you remember when I first looked at one of these maps and I saw those straight lines like this? And I thought, surely that's not how the land allotments are going to look. But now the more I think about it, the more I'm like, maybe. It's like that piece of gum. You got to break it right in half and make sure everybody gets an equal piece, because everybody's going to complain otherwise, right? The children will cry. So I'm not sure. I don't know. I just...
Some of those northern tribes, they just can't live.
Exactly. And that was under the old system when they went in initially and didn't do the job that God told them to do and didn't take the whole land. He had delegated certain portions, and there was plenty of space. They just weren't conquering it. They weren't getting rid of the Jezerites and the Jebusites and the Girzites and the whatever the names were.
Were on the right-hand side. They had more space. 2.5 tribes were on the right-hand side of the Jordan.
Yeah.
To begin with.
Yes, I do remember seeing that. Yeah. I don't see where it is. But even with Abraham's traversing, we see that he was actually on the far right side of the Dead Sea. So I think he's going to come down further than we think. Okay, begins at the far north, and it progresses downward to the holy allotment. Tribe neighbors are decreed. That's another thing I think is very interesting. Tribe neighbors are decreed. It's a analytical conclusion. Did they get to pick which order, who got, where did Dan go, where did Asher go, where did Naphtali? No. God said, Dan will be here, Asher will be here, Naphtali will be here. And then when he gets down into the rest of it, he said, and beside the border of Judah, from the east side to the west side shall be the allotment which you shall set apart, 25,000 cubits in width and in length, like the one of the portions, from the east side to the west side, and the sanctuary shall be in the middle of it. So he measured off then 25,000, I guess it is, cubic feet, and he says, and in the middle of that 25,000 cubic feet is going to be the sanctuary. And to its north border is going to be Judah. So he delegates who gets what order, and that's why I put this on here. Tribe neighbors are decreed, and Judah is north of temple, holy allotment. Where the temple will be, in other words, the holy allotment. And I don't know if that's significant. I'm not sure, but I just thought it was interesting that God decreed. So in other words, have you ever had also seating arrangements in big groups? Have you ever had to do like and you just put the name plaques there and say, it is what it is, and you get to sit with who I put you with, and no, you don't get to move around. And part of that teachers even will do in classrooms, because they don't want best friends sitting next to each other and giggling all day, right? But I don't know why God did it this way, and there may be even a spiritual, and I've heard some pastors preach on it that way, the ones farthest away from God, the ones closest to God. I'm going, I don't think so, because everybody loves the Lord. I just think it could have to do with birth order, or maybe he's keeping them closest to the geographical area that they did inherit, that he initially gave to them. I don't know, but that would be another interesting thing to try to figure out if you have lots of hours in your life to do that. Okay, so 8 to 20 is again now the holy allotment. And I, again, grouped it all in one big paragraph, because what I did then from there was I subdivided, right? There's a holy allotment. One allotment is for what?
For the priest.
But first there's for the sanctuary, right? In verse 8 and 9. Okay, so let's get it in order. Sorry. Okay. And now the next one is for the priests. And how are the priests broken down?
The priests were sanctified as the sons of Levi.
Yeah. So the first one is for the Zadok priests. And the second one is for the Levitical priests, right? Yeah. Again, he separates them. Again, setting apart the Zadok priests, again, who will minister to me before me. The Levites will minister to the people. And I have seen the map also flip on which one's on the top and which one's on the bottom. I don't know which one is correct. It doesn't really say anywhere. I looked really hard to see if I could figure out. There was a hint as to which one is the closest to the Judah border and which one is the closest to the Benjamin border, but I couldn't tell. So on the maps, the majority of the maps, like this one here, this one that I sent out to you guys that has this little green block on it, it puts the Levite portion at the top nearest to Judah. Then it puts underneath that, it puts the Levitical Zadok priests where the temple is below that. And then below that then is going to be the next segment also, and I will talk about that in a second. We've got the priests, and then we've got one more piece right here, which is 15 to 19. Yeah, the city portion. So there's the sanctuary, there's the priest's land, and then there's the city portion of land. All of this is, each of them has their own land area. the sanctuary, the priests, and the city. All three are called what, or considered what? The holy portion. Isn't that cool? And so this original map I sent you is actually really good. All of this in this green plus this part down here. And when you measure it out, it gives your 25,000 cubic squares. Hello there, our Savior. You're saving us again. Not our real Savior, but our earthly Savior. You can come sit right here, Mike, because this is where your goodies are. Okay, so this little square right here, then, it includes the Levitical portion. It includes the Zadok portion. And in the Zadok portion will be the temple, because they are the ones that come closest to minister to him. And then below that is this land piece here, which is for the city. And then two portions of that are delegated for other things. So let's look at that.
So that, you sent that last week?
No? Oh, yeah, this map, yes.
Okay.
Oh, it came in, yeah, because Kristen's not been feeling well, so she didn't get it out early enough. But yes, so it's on your email. Exactly. Thank you. It did come yesterday, I noticed. I did see that. Okay, so now what we have is the Zadok priests are mentioned in 11 and 12. And we had the Levites. Oh, got the wrong ones here. And then the other one, the Levites is 13 to 14. They subdivide those down. But what's really cool is just that you're seeing that even though we do know that the Levitical priests, they were basically demoted because of unfaithfulness, and yet they get all these privileges of living on the holy land, the holy allotment unto the Lord. There's another practical reason why that's true, which is what? Concerning them inheriting that as their land.
I thought Levitical priests were not supposed to.
That's right. They don't inherit any land. So in this case, when you're thinking of this in your mind, what is this land not? What is it not called? It's not called the Levitical land, is it? It's not called the tribe of the Levites. It's the holy portion unto the Lord. This is the Lord's land, but he is allowing them the privilege of inheriting that. He literally says about them, Ezekiel 44:28. Somebody flip back to that and read that real quick. Have you got that handy, Karen? Can you read that nice and loud?
And it shall be with regard to an inheritance for them, that I am their inheritance, and you shall give them no possession in Israel. I am their possession.
Wow. So give yourself a cross reference on your observation worksheet there about this, the fact that the Zadok priests and the Levites, both being of the Levitical line, that their land inheritance is actually God's land inheritance. It belongs to the Lord, and they get to enjoy the privilege of living upon it. But it is all called the holy allotment. It does not belong to the Levites. It belongs to the Lord. And then the Lord said there, I shall be their inheritance, which I think is really awesome. Yeah. All right. The holy allotment, 8 to 20. Now the city, this part was really interesting. So the city, I want to mark, I think I'll put it, I guess I'll do this, the city. I want to go about the city a little bit more detail here. We have a couple of different areas. One portion is for what when you look at the city? So we're in 15 to 19 for the city. So what does it tell you in the very first sentence? This land for the city is going to be? Common use. And it's for two different things. For what? For dwellings and for open spaces. So we've got the city portion, one common space. Number two, land for dwelling. Now, this is residential dwelling, in other words, and it's for the workers for the city. There are going to be workers that take care and maintain the city. Doesn't it say that? Yeah, verse 19. The workers of the city, out of all the tribes of Israel, shall cultivate. They're also going to be cultivating. So these are workers of the city. And they're going to have land for dwellings for workers of the city. And they're from, yes, for workers of the city, workers from all the tribes. That's pretty cool, isn't it?
So they're not gonna live in their allotted tribe.
Well, these people won't.
Right.
Because these are going to be people who are going to come in and say, I'm going to work in the city. This is where and
Like city
it,
employees.
right. And it, and it could be that they apply for the job and they get it. But they've still got their tribal land that belongs to them by inheritance as a tribal people. But it's going to be really cool because you're going to get all 12 tribes represented in the care and upkeep of this holy city, which is on the holy portion. Personally, if you can't be a Levite, this would be the next best thing. You go in and be a city worker and live on the land, on the holy portion, and be as close as you can to all of the excitement of the temple and the glory of God being right there. Personally, I'd want that job. I'm like, I'll mop floors. I can go there. You're all right with me. Okay, so there's common space. That's the city itself. There's land for dwellings, and then there is also land for open spaces. What does that mean? What are they going to do there? What does it tell you? How about verse 18? The remainder of the length around the holy allotment shall be 10,000 cubits. This is talking about the city part. That's going to be 10,000 cubits of it. Toward the east and west, and then it will also be, it's going to be 250 cubits on the east, 250 cubits on the west, 250, so it's a square. The city's going to be a square of 250 cubits. In the middle of that, to each side, east and west, will cover the rest of the allotment, which is going to be 25,000 cubits, right? So you're talking 10,000 cubits here, 10,000 cubits here. How much is left for the city? 5. See, your math works well. Very nice. Okay, and he says about this other land, its produce shall be food for the workers of the city. Okay, so along one side is going to be land for dwelling. On the other side, it's going to be for food. Open land spaces to grow food. Which again takes us back to they're humans in their flesh, they need to eat. Pretty cool. Okay, the holy allotment. So now we know the holy allotment covers the sanctuary, land for the priests, and land for the city. All of that is considered God's holy allotment. 25,000 cubic square. Somebody said in one of the commentaries I read, it's a 10-mile square. Does that make sense? Anybody know? I don't know either. Okay. I'll just believe them. All right. Now, 21 to 22 is the next segment on this, of the next paragraph. And whose allotment are we looking at here?
The remainder shall be for the prince.
Now, the remainder, this is interesting. The remainder. Okay, so what they have just said to you and I is there is an allotment like this. It's perfect square, 25,000 cubics all the way around. We know this has been divided here for Levites. We know this little area right here is the city. So we have the city in the middle. I'll kind of color it in so you can see it. Right there is the city. We have land on one side for dwelling and the other side for growing crops. Up here, we have the temple of God in that little black square. Right in the center of the square is the temple of God. And again, we've already talked about the waters that are going to run out. Okay. And then he says now that those lands are all accounted for, there's more land that goes this way and this way. And what does he give that to? The prince. And the prince gets this land that goes however far it can go until it hits the Mediterranean Sea. And over here it'll be as far as wherever the border boundary is. And he gets the land on each side. But what borders him off is he's going to have brothers. We have Judah up here. And down here we're going to have Benjamin. Okay? So this land right in here, in other words, all of this land, actually that should have gone. Let's see, how did I have that before? Let me look. Okay, yeah, so this line here has to go here, equal with the property.
Oh, right.
Okay, I messed that up, I'm sorry. I'm going to fix it though, because I can erase with my finger and have black marker all day long. Okay, so now you've got that. Now what you know is over here you've got land for the king on that side and land for the king on that side.
So the prince is the king.
Yeah, for the prince. I'm saying the king. I meant the prince. Yeah.
The prince is what?
The prince is that mysterious guy that some people say is King David. I say it's just a man that lives in that day. He's in his human flesh. He's going to bear children and give an inheritance for others. And so I think it's just whoever he is. I read to you guys, I think it was out of Matthew last week, where it talked about them inheriting in that day, that when Jesus comes to sit on his throne, these princes of the 12 tribes will be the princes. Well, in other words, all of these will get princes, including this right here, the princes of the holy allotment. So the holy allotment gets a prince, and so do all the 12 tribes. To me, a prince is probably basically your city governor or your House of Representatives or your senator, or your whatever you want to call him. He's looking out for the welfare of his land allotment area.
But David will be there, he'll be glorified.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he's not giving birth to babies and giving inheritance of the land to them. So it's not King David, in my opinion. I think this is a prince, whoever he is. Will David be there and have some position? Of course. I believe he will. I mean, he's definitely going to be, I think, in Judah, right? So, because that's his tribe. What he'll be doing in Judah at that time, I don't know. But whoever this prince is, he's affixed to the temple. And he has to remember, the people have to give him a tithe of money each time, each year, I think it is, or something, or every so many months. And they give this tithe so that when it's time for the feasts and the different sacrifices they give, the prince has a supply of things to go before the throne and offer on behalf of the people. We read that back when we did our worship section here,
So
worship in the temple.
he get his supply from the tribes?
Mm-hmm. That's why I called it, remember when we were talking about it, I said, I think it's a tax. It's like a tax. It's like an income tax that you're going to give. You're going to bring so much of your flock and give it to the prince, this prince here, and he is going to then offer his offering first, and the priest will offer for him. Then he will offer on behalf of the people, and then still the priesthood does all the executing, but he offers on behalf of them all these additional things. That way, regardless of what else is going on, God always gets his allotted portion of the tithe for worship.
So that prince is really a pretty elevated position.
He is. He gets to go in and eat in the inner court, remember? He's going to go in and sit in the gate of the East Temple, of the East Gate,
Right.
but it's in the portal of the gate itself. He doesn't go inside because he's not a priest, but he's allowed to sit in the gate and eat before the Lord. So that's who this that's who this prince is right here. So this is who we're talking. The prince's allotment, it's this right here. And it's on each side. It's on the, what did it say, west and east and west? Or, let me see, where's the prince's portion? Here it is. East and west. The border to the east and then the border to the west on each side is his. So his land is actually divided, which is interesting. But it nestled in between him, I called this sandwiching. It's like two pieces of bread. This prince's land is on both sides of the holy allotment, and he's anchoring in between. Then to the north and to the south are the other two tribes, Judah and Benjamin, to hem the whole thing in, which is really cool. All right? So that's the...
Notes, that image that you're gonna send us.
Well, it's kind of right here. It's on this.
Okay.
So if you colored all this little white spot here pink,
Oh, okay.
or put a crown, I put a crown on one of mine. Just put a crown here and put a crown here, but this is the prince's land here and here. And then up here and down here, it doesn't delineate the names, but we know the one that's going to butt up next to the holy portion is Judah because it tells us that. Okay.
When you look at this holy district, and if the princes are on the east and
Not all the princes, just the prince of the holy portion.
east and west, but doesn't the water that runs out of the temple run?
It'll run right through his land, all the way down to the water.
Okay, so it's really like this then.
Yeah, I don't know how does yours have a north, south, east, west on it? On your map that you're looking at there? No, you need to figure that out and put it on there for yourself. That's what I do. When they don't put them on there, I figure out where's the east, and I give myself a compass. Otherwise, you're lost. Yeah, because everything in here is directional, north, south, east, and west. That's our most important part to mark. Okay, so we need to move on so we can get through this. Okay, so the prince's allotment. Concerning the prince's allotment, what do we know? His land will flank the holy allotment, flanking it, like a sandwich. That's what I wrote on my note here. And it's Israel's land, from Judah's border southward to Benjamin's northward. That will dictate them. From Judah's border south, north. It should have been north. I got that upside down. I got to fix that when I go home. I put the wrong directions on my notes here. But to the north, up here, this is northward. So Judah's up at the north, Benjamin's at the south. Then they've got other borders here. This border here, I bet, is the Mediterranean Sea on this side. This border over here is going to be some other geographical marker of either a city or another body of water. And it says concerning that land, it exclusively belongs to the prince. Okay, the last one we have, one more to go. We'll put it over here. I know we have two more to do. 23 to 29. Now we have 5 tribes south of the holy allotment. In total, there's 12 portions of land, in other words. So you've got 7 here to the north, and you have 5 over here to the south, totaling 12 tribes, right? Okay. Israel's landmarks and borders are given to you in 47. So I'm going to put this up here. Landmarks and water markers are given in 47, 13 to 20. We just did that in the last chapter. So this is the land you shall divide by lot to the tribes of Israel for an inheritance. So that's it. One more, 30 to 35. We're almost going to make it. Yeah, this is the exit. So what do you call an exit when you're going in and out of a city? A gate. So let's put on here how many gates are there? Yep, the 12 city gates. That's how I titled it, just to be as declarative as I can. Concerning the 12 city gates, what do we know? How many on each side? Okay, there are 3 gates on each side, and that's north, south, east, and west. In other words, it's actually technically in their order, it's north, east, south, and west, which is weird. But north, south, east, and west is how we generally say it. So I just put it that way for simplicity, remembrance better. Okay, and this one here, what about the gates do we know? Something else. What is another identifying thing about the gates? We know there's 3 gates on each side. We know there are 12 of them. What else do we know about the gates?
3 of each tribe.
3. Okay. The gates bear the name of the 12 tribes. Yeah. Thus, there's 12 of them. What about the city? What is the city called?
The Lord is there.
I love that. The Lord is there. Okay, so let me just tell you a couple of things. Number 1, the Lord is there. I went in and looked it up in my concordance. Basically, it's the name Jehovah Shammah. Okay, so you might want to look it up for yourself. 3074, and translation is Jehovah is there.
Yeah.
But when you go in your text, you know how you can go in and look, and they'll give you a Hebrew or a Greek word, a number to go look at. It's number 3074, and when you go to look at it, it's just the name of God. It's another name of God. This city is given the name of God. The Lord is here. So it's Jehovah Shammah.
And we've studied that somewhere in Genesis.
We did, but not this title, not this one, not Shema. Mm-mm. We did all kinds of Jehovah hyphened with another portion, but this one is unique here.
It's just unique here?
Well, I go look it up. I don't know that for sure, but I just saying it wasn't in Genesis,
Okay.
I'm sure. That I don't remember seeing it there. But this one, Jehovah Shema. It is Yahweh. It's Jehovah. Yahweh. Yep. So when you look it up, you'll see all that.
Yeah.
Translates the Lord is here. Symbolic name for Jerusalem. Jehovah, which is if you use that, what do they call that? That tetragram, or it's Yahweh. Okay, so Jehovah. And Jehovah, remember, is the covenant name of God also, which I think is also really cool there. Then we see the 12 sons. I'm going to give you this over here. Names on the gates is the 12 sons. And what I did is I went back. So these are sons by Leah and Rachel. Also their handmaidens, Bilhah and Zilpah. And so if you go into these passages right here, Genesis 29, 32 to 34 is the first one. Then you're going to go into Genesis 30, 6 to 20, and then you'll go into Genesis 35, 18. And the exact names that are given to us right here in the text, which is Reuben, Judah, Levi, Joseph, Benjamin, Dan, Simeon, Issachar, Zebulun, Gad, Asher, and Naphtali. Those are the actual names of the 12 sons born to Israel. i.e. Jacob. Okay, so when you go and look at these references, we did this, so this is review for us. We did the Genesis study. And do you remember why this one drops all the way down into Genesis 35? Who bears a child? Rachel, very, very end, right? And then she dies in birth, giving birth to Benjamin. So we've got, yep. And so I just actually went in and wrote them all in here. Leah has Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, and then Bilhah gave birth to Dan and Naphtali. Then Leah has, Leah's handmaiden Zilpah has Gad and Asher. Now Leah comes back and has two more at the very end of it, Issachar and Zebulun. The last two to be born are Rachel, who had been barren all those years, and she gave birth to first Joseph in chapter 30, and then in 35 she has Benjamin, and she dies. So I just thought that was a point of interest, that the actual sons' names are on these plot lands, okay, or on the gate rather, on the gates. And the plots of land, I haven't checked that out yet, if it's exactly the same or not. I have to do a comparison. I haven't had time. I'll have to do that this week. Okay, we did it. We're just a tiny bit past, so we're good. But that takes care of the particulars of structure, outline, seeing the flow of thought, seeing what's being talked about. Now, next week in your homework, it's our last one for Ezekiel. Can you believe it? And then we're going to be off for a short break in August, which will probably be helpful for me with my house remodel. Crazy. And I'm having some oral surgery done, so that'll give me time to heal. But we're good. So listen, dig in deeply to this last lesson that you've got. It's one more. Any extra questions that you might have, bring them with you. But listen, if you have a question, do some research. I mean, because I may not think of the same things that you think of, and I can't possibly, I'm only one person. I can't be in the brains of everybody. I try really hard, though, but it doesn't always happen. So bring really cool insights to share, and we'll wrap this up at the end. Okay? I'm excited for this to all sink in our lives and to see what God is going to do with it and how he's going to use it for us. So thank you, guys. I'll see you next week for the last half of Lesson 7.